Most people assume intelligence fades because of age, genetics, or simply because some people were born naturally sharper. But sometimes your intelligence hasn't disappeared at all. Your everyday habits are simply making it harder to access. Think of owning an incredibly powerful computer while keeping 50 unnecessary programs running every minute of the day. Nothing is technically broken, yet everything becomes slower, noisier, and frustratingly harder than it should actually be. Your brain can experience something similar when ordinary habits repeatedly interfere with attention, memory, learning, and clear thinking. And that's what makes these habits dangerous. Most of them don't feel harmful while you're actually doing them. There is no warning light announcing that today's choices are quietly making tomorrow's thinking more difficult. Instead, you forget names, reread sentences, lose your thoughts, procrastinate more, and wonder where your sharpness went. Eventually, those little struggles become so familiar that you stop questioning them and simply call them normal. So before blaming your intelligence, examine the environment you're repeatedly asking your brain to perform inside. Because 5 incredibly common habits may be quietly working against the mental performance you're trying desperately to improve. Habit 1. Destroying your sleep. Sleep is usually the first biological necessity people sacrifice whenever 24 hours suddenly don't feel like enough. One more episode becomes another video, another message, another scroll, and somehow midnight quietly turns into 2. Then morning arrives, and you expect your brain to perform flawlessly despite giving it inadequate time to recover. Sleep isn't simply your brain switching off. Important processes related to memory, learning, and restoration continue while sleeping. Your sleeping brain also participates in clearing metabolic waste through processes that differ substantially from normal waking activity. Imagine running a busy restaurant every day while repeatedly sending the cleaning crew home before they finish. One shortened cleaning session won't destroy the restaurant, but repeated neglect eventually makes everything harder to operate efficiently. Insufficient sleep can similarly affect sustained attention, reaction time, learning, memory, emotional regulation, and decision-making performance. The deceptive part is that chronic tiredness can eventually feel normal, even while your performance remains below its best. It's like wearing slightly blurry glasses so long that you've forgotten how sharp the world once looked. One terrible night usually gets your attention. Hundreds of mediocre nights can quietly become your everyday routine. Then caffeine compensates for exhaustion. Exhaustion encourages more stimulation, and late-night stimulation delays sleep again. The cycle doesn't require stupidity. It only requires repeating something convenient until your brain starts paying the bill. Habit 2. Consuming without creating. The second habit creates an especially convincing illusion, believing that consuming enormous amounts of information automatically equals learning. You watch lectures, save articles, highlight books, collect courses, and build a library large enough to intimidate yourself. Everything feels intellectually productive until somebody asks you to explain yesterday's fascinating idea without opening your notes. Suddenly, something strange happens. You recognize the topic perfectly, yet struggle to reconstruct what you supposedly learned. That's because recognizing information and independently retrieving or applying information are fundamentally different cognitive demands. Imagine studying swimming for months while sitting beside the pool and never allowing yourself to touch the water. You could memorize every technique and still discover that knowing what swimming looks like isn't actually swimming. Learning works similarly. Your brain benefits when information must be retrieved, explained, tested, manipulated, or applied. Close the book and summarize it. Finish the tutorial and attempt the task without immediately replaying every instruction. Explain an idea aloud, challenge its assumptions, solve a problem, or teach the concept to somebody unfamiliar with it. Those activities expose gaps that passive consumption conveniently hides beneath the comfortable feeling of familiarity. And discovering those gaps is useful because now your brain knows precisely which connections still require strengthening. Endless educational content can even become entertainment disguised as self-improvement when nothing you consume changes your behavior. That's how someone can watch hundreds of productivity videos while becoming extraordinarily knowledgeable about procrastination during their procrastination. A simple correction is to create meaningful output regularly from whatever information you've been putting into your mind. Write, retrieve, practice, calculate, debate, design, teach, test, or build something that forces genuine mental participation. Information becomes far more valuable when your mind must do something with it instead of merely watching it pass. Habit 3. Constant digital overstimulation. Your attention now lives inside an environment capable of delivering novelty faster than your brain can meaningfully process it. Before breakfast, you can experience comedy, outrage, tragedy, shopping, gossip, messages, breaking news, and dancing cats. The problem isn't enjoying technology. The problem begins when your attention becomes accustomed to constant novelty and interruption. Every notification offers a tiny invitation to abandon whatever you're doing and investigate something potentially more interesting. Repeat that often enough, and sustained concentration can begin feeling unusually slow, uncomfortable, and unrewarding by comparison. A difficult book doesn't vibrate when you're bored or instantly replace a confusing paragraph with something easier. Deep thinking often requires remaining with confusion long enough for your mind to organize what initially feels difficult. Constant switching trains almost the opposite response. Discomfort appears, therefore find something easier, faster, and more stimulating immediately. Imagine preparing for a marathon exclusively through 10-second sprints and then wondering why sustained running feels strangely difficult. Your ability didn't necessarily disappear. You repeatedly trained yourself for a different kind of attentional demand. Even tiny interruptions matter because complex work often requires keeping multiple pieces of information active inside working memory. Check one message, watch one clip, return to work, and your brain must reconstruct the interrupted mental context. Do this repeatedly, and an hour of apparent work can contain surprisingly little uninterrupted thinking. The solution isn't throwing your smartphone into the ocean and becoming a 19th century philosopher living inside a cabin. Instead, make distraction less convenient. Silence unnecessary alerts, move your phone away, and protect periods of single-task attention. Your brain doesn't need permanent boredom. It simply needs regular opportunities to remember what uninterrupted concentration feels like. Habit 4. Never allowing yourself to be bored. Most people now react to boredom as though their brain has detected an emergency, requiring immediate digital assistance. Waiting in line? Phone. Elevator ride? Phone. 30 quiet seconds before dinner? Somehow also definitely phone. We've become remarkably skilled at eliminating almost every tiny gap where the mind might otherwise wander independently. But internally generated thought often emerges precisely when external demands become quieter and attention has room to drift. That's partly why ideas sometimes appear while showering, walking, washing dishes, or staring absent-mindedly through a window. Your brain wasn't doing nothing. It simply wasn't being handed somebody else's content every 4 seconds. During quieter moments, memories can resurface, unfinished problems can reorganize, and previously unrelated ideas can suddenly connect. This doesn't mean staring at walls automatically turns anyone into Einstein after approximately 45 minutes of heroic boredom. It means constantly filling every mental gap leaves fewer opportunities for spontaneous reflection and internally generated thought. Imagine interrupting someone after every sentence and later complaining that they never managed to tell interesting stories. Your own mind may face the same problem when every emerging thought gets interrupted by another piece of content. Try occasionally walking without entertainment, waiting without scrolling, or allowing a quiet meal to remain genuinely quiet. The first few minutes may feel uncomfortable, which reveals how deeply constant stimulation has become your default state. Then you may notice unfinished thoughts, overlooked emotions, unexpected ideas, or problems your mind was still processing. Boredom isn't always wasted time. Sometimes it's simply unused mental space waiting for your own thoughts to arrive. Habit 5. Neglecting your body. The fifth habit begins with pretending your brain and body somehow operate as two completely independent biological systems. People chase better concentration while sleeping poorly, barely moving, remaining chronically stressed, and ignoring basic physical health. But your brain isn't magical software floating above biology. It's an extraordinarily demanding organ living inside your body. Its performance depends on interacting systems involving circulation, metabolism, sleep, movement, nutrition, hormones, and overall physical health. So taking care of your body isn't separate from taking care of your ability to think effectively. Physical activity, for example, has benefits extending far beyond appearance, weight loss, or becoming impressive at the gym. Regular exercise can support cardiovascular health, mood, sleep, and multiple aspects of cognitive health across the lifespan. And you don't need an athlete's routine before movement becomes more useful than spending another evening completely sedentary. Walking, cycling, swimming, resistance training, dancing, or other sustainable movement can all contribute to general physical health. Think of your brain as the penthouse inside an enormous biological apartment building, containing interconnected systems. Neglect the plumbing, electricity, ventilation, and foundation, and eventually the penthouse experiences consequences too. Nutrition deserves similar perspective because food isn't magical intelligence fuel, but long-term dietary patterns influence general health. The same broader principle applies to chronic inactivity, excessive alcohol, unmanaged stress, and other health-damaging behaviors. Cognitive performance doesn't somehow escape biology merely because thoughts themselves feel invisible, abstract, and separate from your body. Sometimes the simplest brain optimization strategy isn't another application or supplement. Standing up and actually moving. Here's what makes all 5 habits particularly deceptive. None usually causes a dramatic collapse after one ordinary occurrence. One distracted afternoon won't destroy your attention, and one shortened night won't suddenly erase everything you've ever learned. The important force is repetition, because repeated behavior continually recreates the conditions in which your brain must operate. Think about dust accumulating on a window so gradually that nobody notices the room becoming slightly darker. Months later, you blame the sunlight without realizing the problem has been quietly building directly in front of you. Mental performance can feel similar when small disadvantages become normal before they ever become obvious enough to question. You stop finishing books because concentration feels harder, then conclude that maybe you're simply not a reader anymore. You forget things while exhausted, then gradually start describing yourself as someone who naturally has terrible memory. You eliminate every quiet moment, struggle creatively, and eventually wonder whether your imagination somehow disappeared with adulthood. Temporary performance difficulties can slowly become identity statements. Unfocused, forgetful, lazy, uncreative, or simply not very intelligent. But your cognitive performance can change with conditions, even though not every cognitive difficulty has a simple lifestyle explanation. The encouraging part is that repetition works in both directions, meaning small supportive habits can accumulate as well. You don't need 17 supplements, 5 productivity applications, or a morning routine requiring sunrise negotiations with your alarm. Start by identifying which of these 5 habits creates the greatest amount of friction in your own life. If sleep is chaotic, stabilize it before spending hours researching increasingly complicated methods for improving your concentration. If digital distraction dominates your day, create protected periods where your phone isn't allowed to negotiate for attention. If you consume endlessly, introduce output by retrieving, explaining, practicing, writing, teaching, or applying what you learn. If silence feels unbearable, deliberately leave small spaces where nothing needs to entertain or stimulate you. And if your body barely moves, choose sustainable physical activity instead of waiting for the perfect fitness routine. Don't change everything simultaneously. Improving one repeated behavior consistently is more useful than temporarily becoming perfect at 5. Because the goal isn't becoming a superhuman genius. It's creating better conditions for the brain you already possess. Protect your sleep. Use what you learn. Train sustained attention. Allow quiet moments. Take care of your body. None of these will magically raise your IQ overnight, and anyone promising that is probably selling you something. But together they can support attention, memory, learning, and clearer thinking instead of repeatedly working against them. So which of these 5 habits has become so normal that you stop noticing what it costs you? Subscribe to Inner Violet for more psychology, self-awareness, and practical insights into how your mind actually works.
Stop chasing motivation. Start understanding your mind. Subscribe to Inner Violet and learn how to think, not just react.